Chapter 36. Lu Mansion, Discussion Hall. Lu Wabai sat on the main seat while head elder Lu Xinqing sat beside him. Below him were the various elders of the family. At that instant, the atmosphere within the hall was extremely strange. Almost everyone other than head elder Lu Xinqing had faces of embarrassment as they looked at the head of the family, Lu Wabai. Lu Wabai looked at the various elders below with a face full of anger. He exchanged glances with the first elder beside him and saw the dissatisfaction in each other's eyes. After a while, Lu Wabai opened his eyes wide. His gaze was sharp as he looked at the few elders below and angrily reprimanded. "Why aren't you saying anything?" "Humph. At this moment, you all feel that Senior Xiao Yan is beneficial to our Lu family and want me to go and speak nicely to him. What do you take me, the clan leader, for? What do you take Senior Xiao Yan for? You all really have guts." When the various Lu family elders below heard this, their expressions changed slightly and they frowned slightly. One of them stood up, stared at Lu Wabai and said, "Clan leader, it's not right for you to say something like this. Family head, it's not right for you to speak like that. You are the family head of our Lu family. Why is it that when you speak, you sound like that senior subordinate?" That elder coldly laughed. After which, his face carried ridicule as he quickly said, "You couldn't have been frightened by his terrifying strength, right? Or perhaps, it was the medicinal pills on him that attracted you. Heh. He is only a person who is afraid of death and is bound by the heavenly lightning. Isn't it giving him too much face to have our Lu family use all our manpower to rope him in? In a while, when clan leader sees him, as long as he casually mentions the ancestors' matter, humph. Then wouldn't he?" That Lu family elder originally wanted to continue speaking. However, he suddenly saw that after clan leader Lu Wabai and first elder Lu Xinqing heard this, their originally gloomy faces instantly changed greatly. Lu Wabai's face was gloomy. His expression was almost crazy as he opened his mouth and roared. "Shut up. You're looking to die." The two of them simultaneously stomped their feet on the ground as their bodies charged toward him. Do Qi wildly surged out from their bodies as each of them threw a punch at the Lu clan's elder. The expression of the Lu clan's elder drastically changed upon seeing this. He wanted to withdraw, but how could he be a match for two 8-star Dozongs? His path of retreat had already been sealed. At this moment, he no longer had any place to retreat. All he could do was forcefully block the attacks from the two of them. Boom. The sound of flesh colliding resounded within the large hall. Only at this moment did the other people within the large hall react. They turned their heads, only to see that the elder of the Lu clan, who had spoken earlier, was like a ball of meat at this moment. Like a cannonball, he shot backwards, smashing the door of the large hall, which was made of good quality cedar wood. Finally, he collided with the wall outside the large hall, creating a large hole. When the other elders of the Lu family saw this, their complexions changed and instantly became serious. They all stood up from their seats and took a step back. They stood together and surrounded Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing in the hall. One of them even scolded angrily. "Lu Wabai, Lu Xinqing, are the two of you planning to betray our Lu clan?" Lu Wabai coldly snorted when he heard this. He turned around and looked at the few elders who had surrounded the two of them. The first elder, Lu Xinqing, frowned slightly. He sighed softly and looked at the other elders before helplessly opening his mouth to speak. "All of you should look clearly. That fellow Lu Kai asked for it. If the old me and the clan head had not attacked and seriously injured him, it is likely that his corpse would have already turned into nothingness." The expressions of all the elders changed when they heard this. One of the elders hesitated for a moment before he could not resist opening his mouth to ask Lu Xinqing, "First elder, what do you mean by this?" "First elder, I wonder what you mean by these words of yours. Didn't the clan head say that Xiao Yan would become the most loyal member of our Lu clan after he came out when he entered the Golden Plate? However, the meaning of your words now is that he still has the ability to kill a member of our Lu clan?" When these words were spoken, everyone's expressions changed again. If that was the case, they had shown dissatisfaction towards Xiao Yan before and had even been disrespectful to him behind his back. Now, wouldn't they all be dead without a doubt? When the elders heard this, their faces became worried. Some of the more cowardly elders were even trembling in fear. When the first elder saw this, he was just about to open his mouth and answer the elder who had asked him the question when Lu Wabai, who was beside him, heavily snorted coldly and opened his mouth to scold. Scram. The seniors must have already known about this beforehand. However, since the seniors did not make a move, it means that they have given you a chance. If you don't want to die, scram to the courtyard in front of Xiao Yan's door and kneel. Wait for Senior Xiao Yan to come out and forgive you. Otherwise, even if the ancestors appear, they will not be able to save you. When the elders heard this, their expressions changed once again. They had always been in a high position. Now that they had to kneel and beg for forgiveness from others, it was somewhat difficult for them to accept. Humph. Since you don't want to go, then wait for death. Lu Wabai glared at the elders. With a wave of his big sleeve, he left the hall. The first elder also sighed and shook his head. He did not say anything and also followed out. Everyone looked at the two people who had disappeared from their sight and looked at each other. In the end, a somewhat short and fat elder was the first to run out with a sullen face. Not long after, all the elders in the hall had completely disappeared. Clan head, do you think something will happen to them? The two of them walked on a small path within the residence. The first elder's expression was slightly worried as he looked at Lu Wabai who was beside him. His tone was somewhat downcast as he asked. When Lu Wabai heard this, he shook his head and sighed. He stood with his hands behind his back and raised his head to look at the sky. The first elder also stopped and looked at Lu Wabai. Lu Wabai quietly stood there for a moment before he opened his mouth and said, "It will all depend on the will of the heavens. They are indeed too self-righteous. In the world of the strong, what can a clan do? It will depend on themselves. I only hope that the seniors can let them go. However, if they are really stubborn, then let them be." After saying this, Lu Wabai's raised head also fell down. Looking at his eyes, there was actually a slight redness. The first elder also sighed and did not say anything else. The two of them walked along the small path together and gradually went further away. In the Lu residence, in front of Xiao Yan's bedroom, there were many figures kneeling in the originally empty courtyard at this very moment. Some of the Lu clan's disciples who had coincidentally heard of this matter had also come to investigate. Seeing these elders from their clan, who were usually high and mighty, actually kneeling in front of Xiao Yan's door with an expression as if they had done something wrong, these younger generation members of the Lu clan endlessly frowned. As they frowned, the elders who were kneeling in the courtyard also frowned endlessly. It was fine if they had done something wrong and had to kneel here. However, they, as a group of elders of the clan, were kneeling here and were surrounded by a group of younger generation members of the clan. This caused the expressions of the elders to become extremely ugly. They wished they could find a hole in the ground to hide in. Finally, after waiting for an unknown amount of time, an angry shout rang out from outside the door behind them. The Lu clan's disciples who had come to watch the show were finally dispersed. All of you, scram. Humph. A group of little brats. Do the elders need you to watch them do things? All of you, scram and go cultivate. As punishment, you are not allowed to leave the residence for 10 days. Phew. Once the crowd dispersed, the elders finally let out a long sigh of relief. However, when they thought of the danger they were about to face, their expressions became downcast. In the courtyard, there was a group of kneeling figures, but the room was completely empty. There was only a young man in white sitting cross-legged on the bed at this moment. Xiao Yan's eyes were tightly shut. As he breathed in and out, wisps of white energy were exhaled from his nose, causing the curtains hanging by the side of the bed to flutter incessantly. The Do Qi in Xiao Yan's body continued to circulating along the root of the flame mantra Qi method. Finally, it returned to the space within the vortex. Following the circulation of the Qi method in Xiao Yan's body, between heaven and earth, the energy of the world gathered into thin lines of energy. From Xiao Yan's Tian Ling point and pores all over his body, they entered Xiao Yan's body and disappeared. Within Xiao Yan's body, waves of modeled energy of the world followed Xiao Yan's guidance and circulated within his tendons and veins. Under the continuous refinement of the heavenly flame, they were transformed into wisps of pure energy and were absorbed by Xiao Yan into the vortex space. Time flew by quickly. In the blink of an eye, 2 hours had already passed. The strange situation around Xiao Yan's body had finally calmed down. Phew. After letting out a long sigh, Xiao Yan's tightly shut eyes slowly opened. The corners of his mouth revealed a smile. With a flip of his palm, an extremely ancient scroll appeared in Xiao Yan's hand. He extended his hand and opened it. Once the scroll was opened, the first thing that entered his eyes were 5 bright silver ancient words. 9 Transformation Body Art. Chapter 37. Xiao Yan extended his hand and unfurled the scroll in his hand. What entered his eyes were the bright silver words 9 Transformation Body Art. Xiao Yan smiled slightly. His spiritual strength poured out and entered the scroll. As the owner, Xiao Yan was completely unaware of what was happening in the courtyard outside his house. Buzz. A soul-shaking buzzing sound exploded from the depths of Xiao Yan's soul. Xiao Yan frowned slightly. Immediately, he gathered his spiritual strength and let out a cold snort. After the sound, Xiao Yan's body, which was formed from his spiritual strength, appeared in a white and empty space. The entire space appeared to be very big and very vast. Not far from Xiao Yan saw that there seemed to be an arc that was not in harmony with the space, yet was completely merged into one. That's right, it was an arc that was not smooth. There was no pattern to it and no trace could be found. At a glance, it seemed to be a wrinkle in the entire space. However, this wrinkle seemed to have no end. This caused Xiao Yan's expression to be grave. His spiritual strength gathered together and probed the huge wrinkle. Xiao Yan's spiritual strength followed the lines of the wrinkle and gradually extended. However, in the end, he was unable to retract his spiritual strength. Xiao Yan's expression was grave. He once again looked at this white and empty world. His mind was filled with thoughts. After a long time, Xiao Yan could not help but curse in his heart. Damn it. What kind of do skill is this? When Yuan Qing gave it to me, he did not even tell me how to practice it. How am I supposed to find the method to practice it in such a big space? Xiao Yan frowned. His face revealed an impatient expression as he continued to curse in a low voice. However, just as Xiao Yan could not help but want to roar angrily, his eyes brightened slightly. His expression as he looked at the entire space also changed a little. Xiao Yan calmed his mind. Both of his eyes were shut. His spiritual strength spread out and spread over the entire space. A while later, Xiao Yan's eyes snapped open as a smile appeared on his lips. He raised his head and looked up. It was still a vast expanse of emptiness, but Xiao Yan seemed to have seen something as he laughed happily. So that's how it is. No wonder I couldn't think of the cultivation method of the 9-body transformation technique. It's because my heart has shrunk too small. This seemingly empty space was the cultivation method that I was looking for. Haha, I've learned a lot. Xiao Yan let out a low sigh. His body shook and his originally normal-sized body swiftly swelled. Within a couple of breaths, Xiao Yan's body was already a couple of thousand feet tall if one were to look at his body size from where he had been standing earlier. However, Xiao Yan continued to grow. Based on the expression in Xiao Yan's eyes, he did not seem to have reached the end. Moments later, Xiao Yan's constantly expanding body finally came to a stop. Xiao Yan looked at the object in front of him and smiled faintly. The corners of his mouth curled into an arc. In the vast expanse of emptiness, 10 figures stood separately. Among them, there were 9 figures that looked exactly the same. They stood at their respective positions with lifeless expressions. Their eyes were empty and their arms drooped naturally, just like 9 puppets. Xiao Yan's face revealed a joyous smile when he saw this. That's right, these 9 figures were the 9-body transformation technique of the 9-body transformation technique. The 9 bodies were the entry level of the 9-body transformation technique. As long as Xiao Yan was able to cultivate the 9 bodies, Xiao Yan could be considered to have truly begun to practice the 9-body transformation technique. Unfortunately, although Xiao Yan possessed 2 types of transformation techniques, he only knew one of the 2 do skills. Moreover, the difficulty of this 9-body transformation technique was likely to be quite high from Xiao Yan's point of view. At the very least, from how Yuan Qing had immersed himself in this 9-body transformation technique for so many years, he had only reached the initial level. From the looks of it, he would need a lot of time if he wanted to master the 9-body transformation technique to the advanced level. However, it was helpless. Ever since Xiao Yan had experienced the matter of the flame demon old ghost, he felt that his future path would not be smooth. If he only relied on the 3000 lightning movement, it would likely be very difficult for him to avoid it. Strength is still the most important thing. Xiao Yan's eyebrows were tightly knit together. His eyes carried a thread of worry as he sighed. After which, his eyes turned and instantly became determined as he muttered to himself. Looks like the most urgent thing now is to quickly head to the northern region and meet Old Hai. Only in this way will I be able to possess sufficient strength to protect myself. Once he said this, he turned his gaze and looked at the 9-body transformation technique in his hand. He focused his attention and began to practice. There was no time or day in training. Until today, 5 days had already passed since Xiao Yan had closed his door to train. The various elders in the courtyard outside had also obediently knelt in the courtyard for 5 days during the days that Xiao Yan had been in his closed-door training. Although they had knelt for 5 days, the various elders did not dare to have the slightest complaint. After all, they had knelt here for 5 days. This meant that Xiao Yan was only punishing them and would not directly kill them. Since this was the case, how could they not properly grab hold of this opportunity? After all, it was better to live than to die a good death. Having a life was the absolute truth. Hence, as long as Xiao Yan did not kill them, they could just kneel. In any case, the entire clan had seen them and it did not matter anymore. Creak. The various elders' bent bodies quickly knelt properly. More than 10 pairs of eyes stared closely at the wooden door that Xiao Yan slowly opened. Xiao Yan strode out of the door. Just as he exhaled a long breath, he was instantly stunned. He blinked a few times, raised his eyebrows high, and opened his mouth slightly. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the elders of the Lu family kneeling in the courtyard. A long while later, under the sighing gazes of all the elders, Xiao Yan lifted his large hand and helped all the elders up. All the elders followed his lead and stood up. Their faces were respectful as they lowered their eyebrows, not daring to make eye contact with Xiao Yan. Seeing this, Xiao Yan frowned slightly. His eyes kept darting around. After a few breaths, he seemed to have understood something in his heart. His eyes dimmed, but there was still a hint of playfulness in the depths of his eyes. Xiao Yan said faintly. All of you leave. I'm going out to train for a period of time. All of you leave. Hearing this, the elders' faces flashed with a hint of luck. They cupped their hands towards Xiao Yan and left the small courtyard. However, during this period of time, a few of the weaker ones did not dare to use Do Qi because of the punishment of 5 days of kneeling. Although they were Do Huangs, they still could not bear it. Thus, it was quite difficult for them to walk. Seeing this, Xiao Yan frowned slightly. He waved his sleeves and a few rays of light flew out. Seeing this, the elders' faces suddenly changed. Just as they were about to use all their strength to withdraw, their pupils suddenly constricted and they stood still. The few elders opened their hands. A jade bottle lay horizontally in their palms. Joy instantly filled the faces of the few elders when they saw this. The gazes they used to look at Xiao Yan were filled with respect. After which, they opened their mouths and spoke in unison. Thank you, senior, for the pill. This junior is very grateful. Xiao Yan made a sound of acknowledgement and did not say anything else. After all of them left, he closed the door and disappeared from Qingyang City. A few days later, outside Qingyang City, in the ancient desolate forest. Bang! An illusionary figure that seemed to be an afterimage, but was even more real than an afterimage, gradually disappeared from the air. It turned into nothingness and disappeared. Xiao Yan frowned slightly. The sweat on his forehead gathered into droplets under Xiao Yan's frown and dripped onto his eyebrows. After which, the droplets fell onto the ground and smashed into a shallow watermark that was hidden in the soil. Xiao Yan panted slightly. The seals in his hands that appeared to be extremely familiar changed once again. As the seals changed, waves of ripples spread out in all directions, forming circular ripples like water waves. Xiao Yan's expression was grave. His spiritual strength was extremely agglomerated and his attention was highly focused. The seals in his hands changed rapidly. Suddenly, Xiao Yan let out an explosive cry from his mouth. Condense. The spiritual strength all over Xiao Yan's body swiftly agglomerated in front of him. A faint human-shaped illusionary figure gradually appeared. The swiftly changing seals in Xiao Yan's hands suddenly stopped. His mouth once again emitted an explosive cry. Spirit transformation realm. Separate. Bang. The illusionary figure scattered again and finally disappeared. Xiao Yan frowned deeply. The most difficult part of the 9-body transformation skill was the condensation of the 9 incarnations at the beginning. Originally, Xiao Yan thought that it would not be difficult for him to do the first step since he had practiced the illusory body of 3,000 thunders as a foundation. However, the first step of the 9-body transformation skill was many times more difficult than the illusory body of 3,000 thunders. The most basic part of the illusory body of 3,000 thunders was to condense a spiritual illusory body with powerful spiritual strength. As long as it could exist in this world and with his own control, he would be able to condense it and supplement his strength in the future. Sooner or later, he would be able to cultivate it to the profound level. However, the 9-body transformation skill was completely different. Although the 9-body transformation skill also required the condensation of a spiritual illusory body of 3,000 thunders, it had one point that the illusory body of 3,000 thunders did not. The 9-body transformation skill required the condensation of a spiritual illusory body of the first spiritual illusory body to be divided into 9 incarnations in an instant. Only then could it be regarded as the official start of the 9-body transformation skill. It was this point that made Xiao Yan feel quite helpless. Chapter 38. Ha! Condense for me. Xiao Yan's expression was solemn. His attention was highly focused. Droplets of perspiration followed his face as the seal on his hand changed repeatedly. His spiritual strength spread out and agglomerated in front of him. A human-shaped illusory figure that looked exactly the same as Xiao Yan's was gradually formed. Xiao Yan saw the opportunity. A thought passed through his mind and the seal in his hand swiftly changed. Bang! Unfortunately, in the end, the soul shadow still exploded into countless tiny light spots with a bang and gradually disappeared into the void. Xiao Yan frowned slightly, but the expression on his face was extremely calm. He no longer had the impatient expression from before. It was as if he already knew that he would fail. Xiao Yan paused for a moment and changed the seals in his hands again. His spiritual strength gathered again and he continued to change the seals expressionlessly. The speed of his hands also became faster and faster. The failures continued. However, Xiao Yan's expression did not change. He remained in an expressionless state. His expression was calm as the seals in his hands changed. The illusory figures in front of him were blasted apart time and time again. Xiao Yan appeared to have entered another space as he repeated his soulless practice. On the other side, there was a person who looked exactly like him. The seals in Xiao Yan's hands were constantly changing. The seals in their hands were exactly the same. Upon closer inspection, the seals in their hands were actually the 9-body transformation technique. The seals in their hands changed at the same time. However, Xiao Yan was always slower than the other person by a beat. Xiao Yan's finger moved at an extremely fast speed. Waves of energy ripples spread out from the moment his finger made contact, forming a dazzling water-like ripple in front of Xiao Yan's body. Xiao Yan's expression was calm. His eyes looked in front of him. At a glance, the person on the other side of Xiao Yan was also looking at him. As the 4 eyes met, the changing speed of the seals in Xiao Yan's hands involuntarily increased. In just a moment, he had already reached the same rhythm as the seals in the hands of the person on the other side. And just as Xiao Yan's hands changed the rhythm of the seals in the hands of the person, Xiao Yan, who had been calm and unperturbed, suddenly had a bright look in his eyes. A bright light flashed across Xiao Yan's eyes. Xiao Yan's eyes suddenly widened. He spread open his right leg and abruptly took half a step to the right. The seal in his hand swiftly changed. After a short moment, Xiao Yan's eyes suddenly brightened and he shouted, "Condense." As soon as the word condense came out, the soul strength surrounding the extinguishing flame profound province quickly dispersed. The figure in front of Xiao Yan had already disappeared and was replaced by a soul shadow condensed from soul strength. As soon as the soul shadow condensed, Xiao Yan's figure, which seemed to be in a horse stance, suddenly stepped forward. At the same time, the seals in his hands flipped and he threw out a palm. He shouted, "Separate." The soul shadow immediately dispersed, but unlike before, this time the soul shadow did not disappear between heaven and earth. Instead, it turned into a cloud of white mist and then dispersed, dividing into 9 clouds of white mist of the same size. Xiao Yan's thoughts moved and the 9 clouds of mist floated in front of Xiao Yan. Then, under Xiao Yan's somewhat surprised gaze, they condensed into 9 figures that were exactly the same as Xiao Yan. The 9 figures were extremely illusory. If one did not look carefully, they would have been ignored directly. Xiao Yan smiled slightly and let out a long breath. Although the 9 figures were not very solid, at least he had now completed the most difficult first step. As long as he completed this step, it was only a matter of time before he could cultivate the 9-body transformation technique to the peak. A thought passed through Xiao Yan's mind. The 9 avatars scattered in an invisible manner and returned to Xiao Yan's body. The reason why the avatars from earlier had emitted a sound when they disappeared was because Xiao Yan had not completely controlled them, resulting in an explosion. Compared to the current ease with which he could control them, that was purely an accident. "Hey, kid, not bad. You were able to enter the ethereal realm at that time. Kid, your luck is not bad." Xiao Yan's expression changed drastically when he heard this. An instant later, however, his face was a little depressed as he opened his mouth and said, "Elder Gu, you didn't speak for such a long time. I thought you had fallen into a deep sleep. But when you suddenly spoke, it was really frightening. I finally managed to enter the ethereal realm, but when I woke up, I was scared to death by you. Hee hee. You've lived for so many years, and you've seen a lot of life and death. How can you be scared to death so easily? Besides, even if you really encounter any danger, even if I don't help you fight, can't I help you remind you?" Xiao Yan nodded upon hearing this. He was just about to reply when Gu Yu opened his mouth again. "Actually, I can't either." Xiao Yan spat out the air that he had just inhaled. He coughed a few times and said with an ugly expression, "Can't I even help to sense danger?" "Of course you can. When the inheritor is chosen, the inheritor has 5 chances to ask for help from the spirit of strange fire. But you have already used them." Xiao Yan raised his eyebrows when he heard this. "Used them? When did that happen? Why didn't he remember?" Xiao Yan was still trying hard to recall when Gu Yu spoke again. "Don't think about it. You used them when you asked me to help you check if there was anyone around in the desolate ancient forest. Xiao Yan's eyes narrowed and his mouth opened slightly. Then he bit his lips with his teeth in disbelief. The muscles on his face twitched slightly. A long while later, Xiao Yan frowned and opened his mouth to ask. That's not right. Didn't you say there were 5 chances? But I only asked once. What about the other 4 times? Gu Yu smiled faintly and said. I forgot to tell you. The 5 of us old guys will each have 1 chance. Ha ha ha. Hearing this, the corner of Xiao Yan's mouth twitched slightly. The hope in his heart was once again shattered. He let out a long sigh and raised his head to look at the sky above his head. Looking at the color of the sky, it was about to turn dark. He had not eaten for a day. Xiao Yan closed his eyes and his spiritual strength spread out. A couple of breaths later, he opened his eyes. In front of him, there was a rabbit whose entire body was curled up. Xiao Yan lifted it in his hand and looked at this pitiful-looking rabbit. If you want to live, you have to rely on yourself. Haha. This world follows the law of the jungle. If you don't fight for your own strength, you can't get anything. You can only be at the mercy of others. If you want to live, you have to kill others. This is the rule of the continent, the rule of the strong. Gu Yu sighed and said with emotion. Time flew by. It had already been 2 months since Xiao Yan had arrived in this world. The night sky was dotted with stars, making the whole sky look like a painting. In the desolate ancient forest, a bonfire was releasing a faint flame. The light of the flame shone, and the forest within 100 meters was covered with a thin layer of red gauze. Beside the bonfire, a young man in white was sitting cross-legged. Xiao Yan's eyes were closed. Between his eyebrows, the red and white lotus-shaped fire seal was faintly emitting a faint light. This silence only continued for a moment before Xiao Yan suddenly opened his eyes. A sharp aura was emitted from his eyes, causing the leaves within a couple of dozen feet around Xiao Yan to move without any wind. The seals in Xiao Yan's hands changed. Spiritual strength surged out from between his eyebrows, slowly revolving and condensing around his body. A moment later, 9 figures that were exactly the same as Xiao Yan were seated cross-legged around Xiao Yan's body. Currently, the 9 avatars were already very different from when they had first appeared. There was a layer of faint invisible flame on the vortex within the bodies of the 9 avatars and on the surface of their bodies. It was repeatedly tempering these 9 avatars. That flame was the heavenly flame that had the greatest effect on spiritual strength, the fallen heart flame. Xiao Yan's spiritual strength surged out, continuously changing above Xiao Yan's head. In the end, it formed a couple of basketball-sized invisible spheres that floated above Xiao Yan's head. A thought passed through Xiao Yan's mind. One heavy soul pearl after another smashed towards the 9 avatars. Although he had already refined 9 avatars, these 9 avatars were still too weak. He needed to first use some tempering methods to solidify the avatars. The most important thing was that Xiao Yan did not have any attribute spirit stones on him. He was unable to carve a chi method to allow the avatars to train on their own. For the 9 transformation body art, not being able to train on its own was no different from a soul puppet. Therefore, Xiao Yan could only use this period of time to solidify the avatars. Time passed. When the bonfire that illuminated the forest was extinguished, the stars in the sky disappeared. The land regained its light. A new day had once again descended upon the continent. Xiao Yan's tightly shut eyes slowly opened. He glanced at the distance, at the shadows of the trees on the ground. He stood up and the 9 avatars around him disappeared. Xiao Yan's body flashed and only an extinguished bonfire remained in the forest. Chapter 39. Azure Sun City, Lu Family Estate. Lu Wabai and First Elder Lu Xinqing walked in the courtyard of the Lu family estate. The people who passed by all respectfully bowed when they saw them. The 2 of them smiled and nodded in response, then continued to walk forward. Looking at the direction, it was the courtyard that Xiao Yan lived in. After silently walking for a while, Lu Wabai saw that there were no people from the Lu family in the surroundings. He turned his head to look at First Elder Lu Xinqing, who was walking with his head lowered, and asked. First Elder, have you really decided to give that thing to Senior Xiao Yan? But that thing is the most important thing to our Lu family. Hearing that, First Elder stopped and deeply breathed in, then slowly exhaled. He raised his head to look at Lu Wabai. His gaze wandered, but in the end, he still deeply nodded and said. Yes, I've decided. That thing should be given to Senior Xiao Yan. Our Lu family indeed doesn't have the qualifications to possess it anymore. If we forcefully keep it, sooner or later, it will bring disaster to our Lu family. It's better to give it to Senior Xiao Yan and let him increase his strength. Only in this way can our Lu family survive. After all, the only power that our Lu family can rely on and trust is Senior Xiao Yan. Speaking up to here, Lu Wabai's face also seemed a bit ugly, and his mood also seemed a bit downcast. A family actually couldn't even protect the most important thing to their family. If this were to spread out, wouldn't it become a joke? Lu Xinqing looked at Lu Wabai's somewhat downcast expression again and said, "Enough. Don't think too much about it. The most important thing to the family? The foundation for the rise of the family? My Lu family? My current Lu family? Do we have the qualifications? Let's not talk about whether or not there will be people who will come to steal it from us in the future. Even if no one comes to steal it, with the talent of the few juniors I left behind, do they have the ability to learn it? Why don't we give it to Senior Xiao Yan and build a good foundation for him? In the future, it will also be endlessly beneficial to our Lu family." Hearing that, Lu Wabai sighed and didn't speak anymore. The two of them walked together towards Xiao Yan's residence. At this moment, in Xiao Yan's bedroom, 10 figures were sitting cross-legged. One of them was particularly eye-catching because he was the only one among the 10 who was completely corporeal and had the aura of a human. Xiao Yan's spiritual strength surged out and once again agglomerated into a couple of heavy soul beads in the sky above his head. A thought passed through his mind and the heavy soul beads immediately flew down. They were divided into 9 waves and fell from the heads of each of the avatars. Each of the heavy soul pearls fell with great momentum, but they disappeared the moment they touched the 9 incarnations. The 9 avatars continued to tremble. Waves of gentle white light were emitted from the surface of their bodies. Xiao Yan frowned slightly. The expression on his face appeared to be a little uncomfortable. However, he once again relaxed and endured the pain. After a while, Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing arrived in front of Xiao Yan's courtyard. The two of them looked at each other and stepped forward without hesitation. Lu Wabai looked at the door of the small courtyard and glanced at Lu Xinqing. He stepped forward and raised his hand to knock on the door. However, Xiao Yan's voice sounded from inside the door. "Come in. I know you're here." Hearing that, Lu Wabai's eyes narrowed. He turned his head and looked at Lu Xinqing. However, he saw that Lu Xinqing had an indifferent expression. Lu Xinqing smiled at Lu Wabai and entered the small courtyard first. When Lu Xinqing and Lu Wabai entered the courtyard, Xiao Yan was already waiting in front of the stone table in the courtyard. The two of them walked up to Xiao Yan and bowed respectfully to Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan waved his hand to dismiss them and indicated for them to sit in front of the stone table. Xiao Yan looked at the two of them and frowned. He asked, "Patriarch Lu and First Elder, is something the matter?" Lu Wabai looked at Lu Xinqing. However, Lu Xinqing stood up and looked at Xiao Yan. He flipped his palm and a silver white scroll appeared in his hand. He extended his hands and placed them on the stone table in front of Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan frowned slightly when he saw this. He raised his eyes to look at Lu Xinqing, but Lu Xinqing directly opened his mouth and said, "I believe that Senior already knows the name of my Lu clan's ancestor?" Xiao Yan raised his eyebrows and took out a scroll. However, when he mentioned his Lu clan's ancestor, he frowned. His pupils suddenly shrank and his eyes widened. He raised his head and looked at Lu Xinqing. His eyes were filled with joy that could not be wiped away. "That's right. This scroll is the Sky Extinction Steps." Xiao Yan already had some guesses in his heart. When he heard Lu Xinqing's words, some excitement appeared in his eyes. Xiao Yan had a faint feeling in his heart that something would happen in the near future. However, with his current strength, it was likely that it would be extremely difficult for him to hide. Hence, he had put in so much effort to practice the 9 transformation body skill. However, with his speed, it was likely impossible to guarantee that he would be safe. However, at this moment, Lu Xinqing just happened to deliver the Sky Extinction Steps. To Xiao Yan, this was equivalent to justice falling from the heavens and providing charcoal in snowy weather. How could Xiao Yan not be wild with joy? Lu Xinqing saw the joy that was revealed on Xiao Yan's face. His eyebrows twitched slightly and some doubt appeared in his eyes. He nodded slightly and thought unnaturally in his heart. "Don't tell me that this Xiao Yan also came to my Lu clan for the Sky Extinction Steps?" However, in the next moment, he smiled and threw away the thought in his heart. He saw Xiao Yan stand up and extend his hands in front of him. He cupped his hands toward the First Elder and said with a tone that carried gratitude, "Thank you, First Elder, for gifting me this Sky Extinction Steps. Speaking of which, I have recently met with some trouble and urgently needed a set of Agility Do techniques to protect myself. This is great. This time around, the First Elder has indeed saved me from the abyss of suffering by gifting me this set of Lu clan's ancestors' famous Agility Do technique, the Sky Extinction Steps. I will definitely thank you heavily." Hearing this, Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing's faces were stunned. Originally, the two of them had thought that Xiao Yan knew about the matter of the sky extinction steps when they saw the surprised expression on his face. However, from the looks of it now, the two of them had really thought too much. In that case, the clan leader and I have helped Senior. This can be considered Senior's fortune. Since that is the case, Senior, please accept this sky extinction steps. The two of us will take our leave first. As they spoke, the two of them were about to turn around and leave. However, Xiao Yan was one step ahead of them and called out to stop them. His face had a joyous smile as he opened his mouth and laughed loudly. Ha ha. The two of you have helped me so much today. How can I let the two of you leave empty-handed like this? These things are useless to me. Just treat it as a gift from me to the two of you. As Xiao Yan spoke, he waved his right sleeve. A white light flashed and Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing were immediately stunned. They saw that on the stone table in front of Xiao Yan, piles of medicinal pills and jade bottles were piled up like small hills. Many natural treasures were piled up as if they were free of charge. Among them, there was actually a furry little beast that looked like a fat cat. This caused Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing's eyebrows to twitch slightly when they saw it. When the little beast saw the two of them, its huge eyes also focused and its pupils suddenly shrank. It raised its huge head and its throat moved. It was unknown what it had swallowed. The little beast turned around and saw a white-clothed youth behind it. It instantly became happy and jumped into Xiao Yan's arms. Xiao Yan also grinned and opened his mouth to speak to the little beast in his arms in a slightly apologetic manner. Sorry, I forgot to take care of you for a while. You can stay here in the future. I have a lot of things to do, so I don't have time to take care of you. Hearing this, the little beast's huge head shook. Xiao Yan patted its head and smiled slightly. He placed it on the ground. The little beast looked at Xiao Yan eagerly. Its claws picked up an 8th grade medicinal pill on the ground and swallowed it with a gulp. Xiao Yan ignored him. However, the corner of Lu Wabai's and Lu Xiancheng's eyes twitched when they saw this scene. A Tier 8 medicinal pill. They were naturally able to recognize it. That medicinal pill was also quite hot in their eyes when they saw it earlier. However, just now, the little guy in front of them actually swallowed it in one gulp. It had to be said that this was a waste of a heavenly treasure. Xiao Yan smiled slightly. He didn't care about the expressions on the two's faces and opened his mouth to speak with a smile. You guys take these first. I'll go back to my room and refine some more for you guys. Also, as I said just now, because I've been busy, I'll leave this little guy in your care. However, please don't worry. I'll prepare the medicinal pills it eats for you guys. After speaking, Xiao Yan turned around and entered the room. Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing only felt that the instant Xiao Yan entered the room and the wooden door closed, the world suddenly became hot and dry. It was as if it had turned into a furnace. Even the leaves of a green tree in the small courtyard were faintly yellow at this moment. Chapter 40. Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing's expressions were grave as they continuously released the dou qi within their bodies, doing their utmost to resist the external heat. But unfortunately, although their strength was extraordinary, the surging heat waves emitted from within the room were far from something they could withstand. The two of them sweated like rain, and every time their sweat dripped, it would instantly transform into nothingness. The two of them forcefully supported their bodies, their brows tightly knit together, their faces distorted, and they couldn't even make a sound. Suddenly, the surroundings became silent, and everything returned to normal. The two of them bent over with their hands on their knees as they struggled to move their dry throats and gasped for breath. Xiao Yan's slightly apologetic voice came from within the room, causing the corners of their mouths to involuntarily twitch. Haha, I'm sorry. I haven't refined pills for 10 years, and I couldn't control myself when I came here today. Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing laughed dryly as they looked at each other. Actually, they could see some astonishment and helplessness in each other's eyes. Since their seniors had made a mistake, who wouldn't give them a chance? Within the room, Xiao Yan sat on the ground, and a crimson cauldron silently stood in front of him. Xiao Yan waved his hand, and with a flash of light, a large pile of heavenly and earthly treasures appeared within the room, and various spiritual medicines were casually thrown on the ground. Xiao Yan waved his hand, and several hundred spiritual medicines flew out from the pile of spiritual medicines. Xiao Yan's palm struck the cauldron in front of him, and a wave of clear sounds of metal striking metal sounded out. The cauldron lid opened, and several hundred spiritual medicines entered the cauldron. Xiao Yan's palm once again struck the cauldron's fire injection point. Boom! A muffled sound of a flame igniting resounded within the cauldron, and a ball of gorgeous flame endlessly surged within the cauldron. The essence of several hundred spiritual medicines was completely refined in an instant. Xiao Yan's 10 fingers moved in succession. As the heavenly flame surged, the refined spirit herbs in the medicinal cauldron kept changing and fusing. After a while, waves of medicinal fragrance spread out from the medicinal cauldron, lingering in Xiao Yan's bedroom. Then, it gradually spread out, filling the entire small courtyard. In the courtyard, Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing both widened their eyes. A thick shock emerged from the bottom of their eyes. The two of them exchanged glances and saw some excitement in each other's eyes. Just by smelling the pill fragrance that was being emitted from the room, the two of them were certain that the medicinal pills that Xiao Yan was currently refining were at least tier 8. From the meaning of Xiao Yan's words earlier, it was likely that the number of medicinal pills that he was refining was quite high. Xiao Yan was raising the overall strength of the Lu family in the name of gratitude. Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing looked at each other again and frowned. Looks like Senior Xiao Yan is about to leave. Otherwise, he would not have given us so many things. Lu Xinqing nodded slightly. His tone carried some reluctance as he sighed softly. When Lu Wabai heard this, the corners of his mouth revealed a smile. He opened his mouth and said to Lu Xinqing, "All right, it's fine. That's enough. How can our Lu clan bind him forever? The Heavenly Thunder Oath is only a guarantee. As long as Senior has the heart to protect our Lu clan, that's enough. Hey. Our Lu clan is still too weak." The two of them smiled at each other and did not say anything else. They sat by the stone table and quietly waited. The medicinal fragrance spread out like fog. The entire small courtyard was covered by this fog. The fog was so thick that it even caused people to be unable to clearly see things within 30 feet. However, the two of them continued to quietly sit by the stone table in the small courtyard. Time passed. In the blink of an eye, 4 hours had already passed since Xiao Yan entered the room. During this period of time, the world was completely calm. However, Xiao Yan frowned slightly. He felt that it was very strange because he did not receive any pill lightning. Strange. Why are these grade 8 medicinal pills unable to attract the lightning tribulation? It seems like there are many differences in this world as well. Xiao Yan sighed slightly. After which, he stood up and waved his large sleeve. He kept all the medicinal pills that he had just refined into a jade bottle. The seals in his hands changed. As the seals in Xiao Yan's hands continuously changed, all the medicinal fragrance within the room and the small courtyard began to unceasingly churn at this moment and gathered towards the room. The seals in Xiao Yan's hands condensed. All the fog in the room began to condense. In merely a few breaths, it had already condensed into a huge white dragon. The seals in Xiao Yan's hands changed once again. The huge dragon also soared and continuously soared above Xiao Yan's room. This is pill transforming into a dragon. Seeing this, Lu Xinqing's eyes were filled with shock. Pill transforming into a dragon. That was something that could only be condensed when a medicinal pill was of the highest quality. However, at this moment, looking at the size of the dragon and the pure pill aura on its body, it was likely that the medicinal pills that Xiao Yan had refined this time were all of the highest quality. When the two of them saw this, they looked at each other and saw the deep shock in each other's eyes. Then, the two of them flew out of the small courtyard. With a flip of their hand seals, a curtain of light spread out between the heavens and the earth, enveloping the entire small courtyard. The two of them landed and stood at the entrance of Xiao Yan's small courtyard. They blocked the door and chased away the people who had come to watch. They did not allow anyone to take a step closer. Those people who had come to watch the divine dragon all curled their lips and resentfully left. After a moment, the wooden door opened. A white-clothed figure walked out from the door. Seeing this, Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing hurriedly bowed. Xiao Yan waved his hand and allowed them to enter the small courtyard. Xiao Yan sat in front of the stone table. With a wave of his big sleeve, a large pile of jade bottles flew out and piled up into a small mountain in front of the three of them. Xiao Yan looked at the two of them and said, "There are a total of 13,400 medicinal pills here. Among them, 6,300 are 7th grade medicinal pills, 400 are 6th grade medicinal pills, and the rest are 8th grade medicinal pills." After saying this, Xiao Yan took off the storage ring on his hand and said to Lu Wabai, "The storage ring is filled with 8th grade medicinal pills for this little fellow to eat. Remember, don't try to snatch these medicinal pills from it. I won't care, but if any of you really try to snatch them from it, you'll have to bear the consequences." Hearing this, Lu Wabai and Lu Xinqing frowned. However, they did not say anything. After all, it was a senior who had spoken. They just had to listen carefully. If one day they really accidentally offended the senior, then they could only bear the consequences themselves. "Okay, you guys take these medicinal pills back first. Before I leave, I'll give the storage ring and the little fellow to you." After saying this, he threw the storage ring in his hand to the little beast and was about to turn around and return to the room to continue cultivating. Seeing this, Lu Xinqing frowned slightly. He hesitated for a moment and could not help but speak. Senior, please wait. Junior feels that there are some things that should be made clear to you. Otherwise, if you go out like this, I'm afraid that my Lu clan will harm you. If that's the case, wouldn't my Lu clan become a sinner for all eternity? Hearing this, Xiao Yan's eyebrows twitched slightly. He turned his head and looked at Lu Xinqing. Seeing the latter's sincere expression, the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. Looks like this Sky Absolute Steps also has some secrets. Then, this is interesting. Let's listen to it. Thinking in his heart, Xiao Yan once again sat beside the stone table and indicated for Lu Xinqing and Lu Obai to sit down. Lu Xinqing also knew Xiao Yan's intention and was not overcautious. The two of them sat beside the stone table. Lu Xinqing did not dawdle and directly opened his mouth to speak. An afternoon passed just like this. After sending off Lu Xinqing and Lu Obai, Xiao Yan also understood some of the secrets of the Sky Absolute Steps. Of course, to Xiao Yan, it might be a secret. However, to the people of the Western region, they were only waiting. Waiting for the appearance of the Sky Absolute Steps, waiting for a great opportunity. Xiao Yan found out from Lu Xinqing that the Sky Absolute Steps was one of the 3 famous Do skills of an ancient almighty in the Western region, Tianju Shangren. It possessed supreme power. Tianju Shangren was once famous in the Western region. He made his debut 5,000 years ago and used only 1,000 years to transform into a Do-di. After that, he continuously made breakthroughs in the following 100 years and became an origin transformation expert. However, ever since then, he disappeared without a trace. There was no news of him at all. Only his 3 famous Do skills were left behind. The 3 Do skills were all human rank Do skills. However, they were all top-tier Do skills. They were respectively Sky Absolute Palm, Sky Absolute Finger and Sky Absolute Steps. Among them, the Sky Absolute Palm was said to be able to cover the heavens and earth with one palm. It was said to be the most powerful Do skill among the 3. Next was the Sky Absolute Finger. The Sky Absolute Finger was known for its ruthlessness. It was said to be able to destroy 10,000 souls with one finger and shatter immortal souls with one finger. Finally, there was the Sky Absolute Steps. Although the Sky Absolute Steps was a human rank Do skill, its true power was unknown and unattainable. Even Tianju was unable to guess its true power. The Sky Absolute Steps, the highest realm of the Sky Absolute Steps, was to walk through the heavens and earth as if walking through the endless void. The 3 Do skills of Tianju were the greatest treasures of the Western region. They were the method to open the cave that Tianju had left behind. Only the 3 Sky Absolute skills could open the Tianju tomb.